Ty here. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so forgive me if I'm a little thrown off. We don't really do the morning videos much these days. We used to do it a lot in the early days of the channel, but different job, work schedule kind of plays a factor in that. And then also, it also depends on the need. But given recent events, as you can see on the screen here, we're trying to fit videos in where we can. Obviously, the February outlook is important, so we're going to push through and do this one this morning. Hopefully you guys appreciate the video. Hopefully you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Appreciate you all for tuning in and being here. That being said, obviously we know right now big Arctic air outbreak is coming. We're going to be dealing with significant cold air to end out the month of January, but as we look towards February, there's some good news to be had. We're going to start to see a warming trend, a thawing out, if you will, really, at this point, because this week's that's coming up, it's going to be pretty cold. But if we look over to the south here in particular, where we're going to be dealing with temperatures that are probably expected to be 20 to 30 degrees below average, there is very good confidence that we're going to see a warmer than average February. And the same can be said over towards the southwest. Where we're going to be kind of hanging out a little bit above average are these areas that are going to be in the white here or in the plain color. But even so, considering what we had with January, I think a lot of us will take it. Now, there are some areas over towards the north and west that are going to be a little bit below average. This definitely kind of has that look of a negative P&A setup. And in a negative P&A, we're typically cooler off towards the west and warmer off towards the east. Definitely has that look. And I've also seen this look before during spring months. So I'm a little bit curious as to what severe weather could look like, especially as we progress through the month of February as well. The precipitation outlook kind of backs up the little hunch that I have right now. So I have a fleeting suspicion that while this isn't exactly what the storm track is going to be, I do expect to see at least a few troughs to come into play here, and maybe some strong mid to upper level lows to go with that. Depending on how those warm sectors advance along with Gulf of Mexico moisture, could throw this map out of whack a little bit. Some of these areas that are in the lighter shades of brown where we're expecting below average precip may be right at average or just above. So by the time we do the follow-up video at the end of this month, this could look a little bit different here. Both of those maps honestly could, but I'm especially uncertain with this map here. Now, the areas where we have the darker shades of brown here, where we're expecting well below average precip here, I think that for the most part, those will stay. Now, one thing that kind of interests me about this too, and this will be with the spring outlook that we'll be talking about as we go further along here, is this area right here being drier than average. If any of my weather nerds here know what the EML is, seeing this signal right here should definitely interest you. If you have any questions in regards to that, feel free to leave some in the comments. That being said, our above average areas in regards to precipitation, which also kind of backs up my hunch, is over towards the northwest, where we're expecting probably a lot more in the way of storm systems over here. Like I said before, I expect to see more in the way of troughing to occur past the Rockies, and this is why the signal over here towards the Great Lakes and the Ohio Valley is so strong for above average precipitation to go along with it. So again, there is some moving parts to this, but I do find it interesting that we have above average precip here. I wouldn't be surprised to see this line stretch a little bit further to the south here. It may stay the same, but I wouldn't also be surprised to see this line here kind of retreat to the south as well too. So like I said, a lot of variance still left in this outlook here. This is just the first look, as this video is titled here. But one thing that I'm also keeping an eye on, of course, is our oscillations. Depending on how the air up north moves determines a lot in regards to what happens really over the entire world, but in particular we're going to be looking over the lower 48. But as you can see right now, we're looking toward about a week ahead, so we already know what we're dealing with here. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't happy about it. Trust me, I'm not either, because I don't want to work in temperatures that are in the teens right now. It's going to be pretty brutal, if I were to say so myself. But as we go further along here, look at how things switch up really quickly. So already a classic instance as we get towards February 1st, where we see the negative PNA take effect. This blue area right here is a cold air mass, and as a result, we're going to see more cold air over here. See a little bit of warm air mass popping up over the deep south and the southeast here. So depending on how this turns out, I do think that there could also be a couple chances for severe weather here. Not the best look, obviously, and then of course we're very far out on range, so it's kind of hard to really pinpoint where or if anything would occur. But as we go further along here, we start to see a very nice looking pattern on here where just about the entire low 48 is kind of on a warming trend here as we get towards February 8th. Now, just how extensive that is, we'll talk about in a moment. But as we go further along here, you do start to see more of that cold air coming back in towards the northern states, hence why we have that below average signal over here towards the north and west. But also still have plenty of warm air off to the south here. I do think at some point we're going to have collisions between these two air masses, and this is when our severe weather and our storm threat in general will increase. So as a result, we're going to go ahead and take a look at where the jet stream could end up lining up here and where those clashes could occur. Again, not a lot of confidence in this. We're looking at this also from week to week, so this isn't showing what could be going on in between these two time frames here. So obviously this is the 25th here, frigid air. Watch this, boom, switch. There's our negative PNA. Definitely thinking somewhere over towards the southern plains and the Ozarks are going to be a point of interest. Tennessee and Ohio Valley to go along with that as we start out February. Could be a point of interest for severe weather. Like I said, a little too far out to get into the details with that, but definitely going to be keeping my eye on this particular area here, I would say. No, I had the blue color on here. But in any case, though, if we move this forward, you can see that entire lower 48 ends up in a warming pattern at this point. Dominant air mass really kind of pops up around the southeast here. I think some ridging comes into play. And this leads to some pretty fair weather, and probably part of the reason why we end up having some of that below average precip signal to go along with it. I don't know if this lasts, however, because once we start to get that cold air to rush back into the west, this is where things might get a little bit interesting. Still a lot of question marks with this, and then also being so far out of range as we are, this is still very much prone to changing here. This is, like I said, this is more or less an early look here. Final outlook video will be at the very end of this month. So how does this affect our temperatures? Well, as you can see here, of course, I don't even need to say it. This upcoming week is going to be cold. And then look at how we switch up. We're already starting to see some good warming occurring by the time we get towards the start of February. And then by the time we get towards February 8th, very impressive warming trend for the entire lower 48 here. Only a couple areas are really below average at this point by February 8th. Of course, this is looking at just the day. There's still going to be some cold days mixed in, but not quite as abundant as what we've seen for this month. So we go further along here. This is when we really start to warm up at this point. The southeast in particular has some of the most impressive warmth that we've seen here. Well above average here. This is about, I would say, 20 degrees above average in some spots here. Then over here, we're saying about maybe 10 to 15 degrees. There could be an isolated pocket over here towards the Mississippi Delta where it could even be 25 degrees above average. So unseasonably warm temperatures coming into play here as we close out the month of February based off this look. And then we see that cold air begin to sneak back in, and again, this is where I start to think that that severe weather threat comes into play here. So of course, as we get closer to springtime, this is to be expected, so not really much of a surprise, but definitely want to start paying a little bit more attention to those severe weather outlooks, because we may start to see a little bit more in the way of activity there. Last thing we'll take a look at is the precipitation outlook. And some of this does kind of back up my hunch here again, as I said before. So it's February 1st. This does look like it's a little bit favorable for a potential severe weather look over towards the deep south, particularly over towards the Delta and maybe the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. So go further along, pattern becomes a little bit quieter. Towards the 22nd, depending on how far that warm sector pushes north, could be potential for another event in the future. Obviously, other factors come into play here, but just looking at things from a preliminary standpoint, very early on as well, at that, I would say that anywhere from here to here, I would be watchful for severe weather. We'll just have to keep an eye on this area as we go further along. But in any case, though, we'll move this further all the way into the first day of March, and you can see that there is a active signal over here towards the eastern half of the US to go along with this. So main things that we're going to be looking out for as we go further along is negative PNA to take over, so cooler temperatures will be further out towards the west. Big time warming trend for the entire lower 48, and then of course we'll be also watching for severe weather signals as we also go through the warming trend to go with it. So time will only tell what happens with this exactly. Make sure you hit that like button, get that bell on for future notifications. I'll see you guys later this afternoon to talk about, of course, the prospect of yet another southern winter storm. Until then, take care, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your